Good afternoon. My name is Bill O'Brien. I'm the Senior Advisor and Director of Creative Forces for the National Endowment for the Arts. Creative Forces is an initiative of the National Endowment for the Arts in partnership with the Departments of Defense and Veterans Affairs that seeks to advance health, well-being, and quality of life for military, veteran families, and caregivers in both clinical and community settings. Today, we're going to be focusing on insights on how to serve military and veteran populations. We're going to be looking at two papers that have either been recently published or will be soon to be published, as well as taking a look at one of the projects that we have been associated with that has been setting up community engagement programming for military families in community settings. With us today, we'll have Rebecca Boudre, who's our lead music therapist for Creative Forces. We also have Jessica Herman, who is an art therapist for Creative Forces. Both Rebecca and Jessica are working with administrative support from the Henry M. Jackson Foundation for Advancement of Military Medicine. We're also going to have Jennifer DeLucia and Rachel Lisner, both from the Veterans and Military Families Institute at Syracuse University. And our last panelist is going to be Niyati Dokai, who is the director of the Veteran and Arts Institute at George Mason University. So just a couple of things up front. We do want to have some Q&A with our audience, and we're eager to have that conversation. If you have a question, please put it into the Q&A at the bottom of your Zoom screen and not the chat. We will be monitoring the Q&A, and at the end of the program, when the three panelists are done with when the three panels are concluded, we'll be circling back for an open conversation, and we'll be looking for questions that you've put into the Q&A. So once again, thank you so much for joining us today. The purpose of today's webinar is to provide meaningful and useful information for people who are trying to support military and veteran families and caregivers, whether in clinical or community settings. And we'll circle back at the end and talk about some of the programs that are happening now and some of the opportunities that others can join us in collaborating to support these folks. But first, let's just go ahead and start with our first panel. We're going to be bringing on Rebecca Boudre and Jessica Herman. Rebecca and Jessica, as I mentioned, are creative arts therapists for Creative Forces, and they are both co-authors. They are among a larger set of co-authors for a Creative Forces Programming with Military Families publication that includes overviews and vignettes of music therapy, art therapy, and dance movement therapy programs being carried out by Creative Forces. And they'll let us know a little bit about what those programs are and what those activities are providing for the participants and what we're learning in terms of what the value and impact is for these kinds of creative arts therapies for military families. So let's bring on Rebecca and Jessica.
Thank you, Bill. I am a board certified art therapist, and I joined the Creative Forces Network working at the Intrepid Spirit Center at Fort Belvoir Community Hospital 5 years ago. My mission has been to create and sustain a family art therapy program here. Other CATs across the Creative Forces Network also work with families in different capacities. So this includes not only art therapy, but music therapy and dance movement therapy. And we are creative arts therapists, which sometimes we call ourselves CATs, if you hear me say that. So we are always sharing our experiences and learning from one another. And this has resulted in this collaborative article. The article presents different interventions or assessments we use to address the needs of service members and their families affected by traumatic brain injury and post-traumatic stress disorder. So the article came together through the leadership of Dr. Joya Chilton, an art therapist working with me here at the Intrepid Spirit Center at Fort Belvoir, as well as our own Creative Forces music therapist lead, Rebecca Boudre. Rebecca and Nathaniel McLaughlin, a music therapist at the National Intrepid Center of Excellence at Walter Reed, contributed to writing about a mother and a daughter who engaged in music therapy. And then Elizabeth Freeman, our dance movement therapy lead, she worked with a couple at the Intrepid Center of Excellence, Walter Reed. And then also Dr. Stephen Kaza. He is a professor of psychiatry and associate director at the Uniformed Services University. And he offered his expertise from his career of working with service members and their families. So as a result of these creative arts therapy sessions that we will review, we were able to identify challenges that military families face, as well as their strengths. We saw an improvement in interactions between family members, and we saw them create a deeper understanding for one another and create more cohesion and connectedness, which overall strengthened their resilience. So through my art therapy practice at the Intrepid Spirit Center, I've worked to discover how I can best serve military family needs. So there have been challenges along the way. And one of those is, publicizing the services and getting family members into a session within the clinical setting. And even so, I have been able to work with amazing families and develop a strong foundation of approaches to art therapy practices. So stemming from this work, we have now expanded an art therapy program to Joint Base Lewis McChord that furthers the work on the clinic to community continuum. So back to the article, each case vignette within this article is a representation of the diverse familial relationships and structures that can be found in military families. The family that I wrote about in this article consisted of the service member Frank, which is a pseudonym, his wife, 2 sons, 3 nieces, and his sister, who all lived within the same household. I used an art therapy intervention that I shaped to fit the needs of families, which is the Animal Strengths and Family Environment Directive. Each family member is invited to draw an animal to represent themselves based on their physical attributes or their personal strengths. Then they're asked to work together to create one environment that sustains the needs of every animal. This directive helps each of the family members discover their individual strengths and identities while also exploring safety, needs, and roles within the family. So Frank and his family created this detailed piece of artwork together that you see on the screen. Frank is represented by a bear in the center right. We also see some different species of cats. There's a snake and an earthworm. So in the reflection of their artwork, the family commented that it looked crowded and chaotic. And this can be related to what it's like to live all together under one roof. So many of them also used a shared metaphor of a cave. So you can see 4 different caves within the picture. The art therapy process allowed them to communicate and see each other in a new way, which was validating. And it allowed them to empathize with one another's needs. It improved cohesion as they were willing to work on respecting each other's needs for boundaries within the home. So now I'm going to hand over the mic to Rebecca, who will present on the rest of our article.
Thank you, Jessie. And as Bill and Jessie mentioned, my name is Rebecca Vaudrey, and I'm the lead music therapist for Creative Forces. And today I'll be representing dance movement therapy and music therapy. So kicking it off here with dance movement therapy. And the vignette in the paper, as visually depicted here, describes a mirroring method. And this was facilitated, as Jessie said, with a couple. And overall, this intervention supports empathy and reciprocity development between family members through not only mirroring each other's movements, but also the associated feeling states that accompany them. And so relationship dynamics are explored through examining these moments of embodied discord, for example, any points of internal conflict or tension, and also identifying moments of attunement, awareness, responsiveness, and working towards resolution of that. And so in addition to couples and family sessions, the Creative Forces Dance Movement Therapy programming supports a group for spouses. And this is aimed at building group cohesion, providing participant support, and really creating a brave space for spouses to explore different feelings they have or changes that they might want to see in their family unit, and overall enhancing receptivity to treatment. Dance movement therapy programming focuses on increasing mutual understanding through means of nonverbal communication. We saw this in the picture that Jessie just showed of the intervention that she had. We'll hear about this nonverbal communication through music. So this is really something that is captured across the creative arts therapies and the arts at large. And so in this way, movement-based interventions really support the family members, and improvisation is used in collective movement. And so family members really are better able to understand their own internal rhythms. And then as that internal awareness is increased, they really can become more aware of how their personal preferences and that externalization fit into the greater familial system. And I think this is just a great segue into music therapy. We're talking about rhythm and improv and these fluid flow states. And so as far as this is figure 3 from our publication, and this shows a family-themed songwriting and recorded project, as Jessie said, was completed by a service member and her mother. Her mother was also serving in the capacity of her non-medical assistant and her primary caregiver. And so in this case, music therapy interventions supported creative expression, promoted healthy communication, and this was through processes of lyric analysis, songwriting and recording, interactive music making, instrument choice and learning, improvisation. So we're seeing some real overarching themes here with the creative arts therapies, and variants in structuring and sculpting different song lyrics, different instruments, different tones, really all with consideration to what the musical dynamics were conveying, the speed and the tempo and the volume, the different modes, major or minor. And so this is really a robust process, as all the creative arts therapies interventions are. And the second part of this is, the recording element, which you can see reflected here on the right, where being able to record this, these patient and family created songs, these original products, provides something tangible for the patient to, share with their friends and families and loved ones. But for themselves, it gives them something to reflect on different points in their treatment, gauge progress, track what they've accomplished in the rehabilitation, as well as identify some stuck points for continued work. As Jessie said, this paper, as we went through it, really uncovered areas of strength and also areas for growth. And through my work as a board certified music therapist, I've commonly found that specifically with songwriting, the process really truly begins when the song is complete. So if we think about the song as a mission, something that we're going to create, that's the mission. We create the song, it takes a lot of focus, attention, teamwork. But once that mission is complete, the process begins as we listen to the creation. The service member and their families are acknowledging the processes that went into it, identifying meaning and purpose, and then often reflecting on that and sharing it out with others. So in sum, as a result of these family creative arts therapy sessions, which supported engagement in creative expression, families were better able to identify challenges and discover strengths and improve intrafamiliar interactions, and create deeper mutual understandings. And this increased familial and social connectedness, and as Jesse said, strengthened family resilience. This we found encouraged motivation in other areas of rehabilitation, daily life, and overall independence. I think just to kind of wrap it up, one of the most profound experiences for me about working with creative forces is really that ability to have conversations across our clinics, as Jesse was mentioning, replication, conversations, and also our communities as we share information and really learn from our distinct and overarching approaches, really to maximize the access to service members, the veterans, their families, our patient population in both clinical and community environments. And I'll just wrap up by sharing a quote by Mrs. Claudia Avila, wife of Captain Luis Avila, which we have shown multiple times, but I just really think captures the family voice. It's truly a miracle. Without what Creative Forces has done for Luis, we couldn't have in my family the quality of life we have. We don't even think we are disabled anymore. We can go anywhere and we don't see the disability. We only see the possibility. Back to you, Bill. Thank you so much. Thank you, Jesse.
Thank you, Jessica and Rebecca. It's always great also to hear that quote from Claudia as well, who's a good friend of the program and a great example of a caregiver who has demonstrated such resilience. And we want to keep families and caregivers definitely in mind as we think about Veterans Day, as well as Military and Veterans Family Month, which is part of what we're celebrating here today. Before we transition to the next conversation, I just want to pull out a couple of things and we'll circle back to them when we come back for the conversation later. But we really do want to be thinking about what the benefits and impacts are for the participants, whether there's in clinical these activities are in clinical settings like what Rebecca and Jessica were just describing, or in community settings. They're similar, but I think there's context from both that can inform each other, but there's unique strengths in both environments, depending on what kinds of outcomes you're focusing on. So some of the key findings, for example, in our clinical programs have been being able to process trauma or reduce PTSD symptoms, for example, or building social connection, having the ability to experience hope and gratification. And I think building resilience is something that's pretty universal. All of those you can think of, again, those are the key findings from our clinical research. They're good to keep in mind as we think specifically about family programs. Some of those are probably going to be more relevant. Resilience building is a big one. Obviously, social connection at a family level is huge. But then also as we kind of transition into the conversation with our Syracuse colleagues, we commissioned a report, a military family needs assessment, knowing that we were preparing a national grant program to bring some of these efforts out into the community. And we know that there's so many capable and eager community arts providers who really want to be standing up programs and interacting effectively with their local military and veteran families. But often we hear that they want to connect, they're not sure how, they want to understand the population better. They want to understand what those unique needs are and what their experiences are. So this military family needs assessment was commissioned a while ago, and we're doing a revision on it, and we'll be publishing it soon. Key findings from it can be found on our National Resource Center now, and one of my colleagues is going to drop that into the chat, a link so that you can see on the Creative Forces National Resource Center some of the top line key recommendations for clinicians and for community arts providers on how to understand the unique needs of different segments of these military and veteran populations, including children, some subpopulations, including women, LGBTQ+, for example. But let's go ahead and move into a conversation with Jennifer DeLucia and Rachel Lisner. And again, these are co-authors from Syracuse University and their Institute for Veterans and Military Families. And welcome, Rachel and Jennifer. And I'm just going to go ahead and turn it over to you and let you provide us some summaries of the report so that you can share with our audience some of your insights that you were able to help glean for us, so that when we do think about trying to stand up services for these populations, we have some really good, well-grounded information to work from. So I'll go ahead and hand it over to you.
Great, thank you so much, Bill. I'm just going to share my screen here. Okay, so happy to be joining everyone, happy and excited to be talking with all of you about this report. So as Bill mentioned, the aim of this report was to understand how arts programming can effectively address the needs of military-connected individuals. And we conducted this report in 3 phases. So we did a comprehensive literature review of peer-reviewed journal articles, white papers, reports, and we focused on stressors, strengths, challenges, and the experiences of military-connected individuals, looking primarily at 4 main sort of subpopulations. So service members and veterans, families, children, and caregivers. We also conducted interviews with subject matter experts in a variety of roles. So researchers, program directors, creative arts therapists, and community-based arts providers. We then combined all that we found from the literature review and the interviews into the report, and also crafted recommendations for practitioners. And so for the purposes of this presentation, we'll be focusing on military families, military children, and caregivers, but the report does, as I said, also include a section on service members and veterans. And I used some quotes from subject matter experts to summarize some of the most prominent themes and needs. But again, within the report, there's a lot more detail provided. So this first quote here says, families can be strong and resilient and still have needs and challenges that make life stressful. So many of the experts we spoke with highlighted the need to focus on the strengths and the skill sets of military families. Some of the strengths that we discussed within the report include camaraderie, a connection with a greater military community, openness to change and new things, and values relating to their family's service and selflessness. Also, within the literature, there's a focus on military family closeness and connection as a result of their shared experiences and making meaning of challenges. The second quote talks about diversity. It says, since there's an increasingly diverse military, we need to have programming that is inclusive in engagement and the way we implement design services. We also need to have a better understanding of the intersection of different kinds of diverse populations within military and veteran populations. So here, what we're talking about are all kinds of diversity. So the report discusses dual military families, blended families, single parent. It also touches on different types of service, or where you are in sort of the service continuum, actively serving, veteran, National Guard and Reserve families, and also racial and ethnic diversity, LGBTQ+, families where the service member is female. This was across the board identified as a gap in both programming and the research. Moving on to military children, several of the subject matter experts talked about the importance of developmentally appropriate practice, and touching on how programming should meet military children where they are at, and remember that not one size fits all kids. And another talked about how military children and their families are often sort of invisible within their community. So a really primary need was identifying military connected children, particularly the children of veterans or National Guard and reservists. So it's vital that community providers first, develop a method or a mechanism for identification, and then also an understanding of sort of the military culture and context. One of those really important contextual pieces are the various transitions that military children encounters. So that could be, school moves. It could be the transition from military service to veteran life. And it's important to keep in mind that through all of this, kids are dealing with sort of more typical childhood stressors and experiences. So better understanding how those interact with the features of military life. And again, always keeping in the back of our minds sort of how this fits into their growth and their age and maturity, always through the lens of child development. And then this quote about how there are civilians that think the Guard and Reserve don't deploy, again, having an understanding and sort of that cultural competency of the communities that you're working with, so that you're aware of some of the unique needs that different families and children may be dealing with. And then speaking a bit about caregivers, this quote here is touching on burnout, as a result of a combination of issues. So it's important that we can, kind of understand the pileup of stressors and how they interact with the strengths of caregivers. We see a lot in the literature about caregivers being at risk for neglecting their own physical and behavioral health needs. But one other piece of that is that there are programs and services available to them, but we heard a lot about sort of the barriers to access, and some of the primary barriers are related to a need for childcare, a need for flexible scheduling, like virtual options. So yes, there is this need for respite care and services, but the need for childcare and flexible options also need to be addressed. And then this quote here, caregivers value freedom from their veteran and benefit from knowing they're not alone by connecting with others. So isolation is something that came up with really all of the groups, all the subpopulations, but it seems to be particularly heightened for caregivers, and formal and informal support, social support networks can really help reduce that and improve the satisfaction associated with caregiving. And a lot of the experts touched on, addressing a sense of belonging and community connectedness as a way to kind of validate the experiences of caregivers and again, reduce that isolation. And I'm going to turn things over to Jen.
Thank you, Rachel. Okay, so now I'm going to go into some of the gaps and recommendations that were identified in our study. So subject matter experts really called for more programs that specifically address the unique needs of veteran families, noting that military experiences continue to affect families well after service. It's important that service providers consider the individual needs of family members as well as sort of the interrelated needs of the family unit. Experts also highlighted the lack of programs that were specifically tailored to the needs of Guard and Reserve families. And one participant argued that the quality of programs may be even more important for National Guard and Reserve families, since they often lack the connections that active duty families have. Researchers we interviewed emphasized the critical need for programs that were based in and informed by research. And another important gap that was identified was the need for more outreach to make families aware of existing services and then also to continue to reduce stigma. So I'll cover an overview of 8 key components to successful programs that were identified by experts that we interviewed that apply to both creative arts therapists and community arts providers. You can find more detailed information in the report, as well as some specific recommendations for clinical and specific recommendations for community arts providers. So subject matter experts said that successful programs work with the whole family. Community arts engagement opportunities can offer additional support and connection that can help families to thrive. And creative arts therapy can provide an opportunity for the time and space for family members to communicate with each other, express how roles have changed, and work through any conflict that may arise. And I think we heard this from our first group of panelists. The arts as a form of nonverbal communication are often less threatening and can help families to better empathize with one another. And successful programs can also focus on resilience, improving parenting and relationship skills, developing family coping skills, and enhancing family communication. And important to always consider including children in the process. Successful programs consider caregiving barriers, as Rachel mentioned, considering ways to address these through flexible approaches, virtual options, concurrently running programming for children and parents together, either together or at the same time, can help to reduce some of those barriers. Learning about military culture and life for both active duty and veteran families. And there are some really excellent free trainings available through the Psych Armor Institute if you're looking for a good place to start. Experts talked about the importance of operating from a strengths-based perspective. So shifting to a wellness focus can improve outcome and engagement, because we're moving away from this focus on disorder and diagnosis, instead focusing on health and wellness, really promoting a positive strengths-based approach to working with veterans and their families. Exemplary programs bring military families together through community programming to help address isolation. And as Rachel mentioned, social connection is repeatedly cited as one of the main factors that supports healthy transition for military families. So really thinking about how programs can help to increase those opportunities and build a sense of community for military families. Experts talked about how creating opportunities for families to build skills that will increase confidence, independence, and adaptation to civilian life were very important. Engaging in the arts can be a chance to be adventurous and to take some safe risks as an individual or as a family, to monitor self-progress, to improve on or learn a new skill or craft. And then the risks that are taken and the skills that are developed and exercised through engagement with the arts can help families to build confidence and skills to adapt to some of the challenges they may be experiencing. And I've heard this a lot in my own art therapy practice, where a family member might say, hey, I didn't know that I could do that. And they might be talking about a product that they've created in the studio, but that confidence to try new things and be successful is often carried out into other areas of life. Again, build in measurement and evaluation to track outcomes that will help you determine if your program's meeting its goals, affecting change, and encouraging participation. And that data is really going to help to inform not only future research, programming within your center, but also can help support some funding opportunities in the future. Continuous outreach is important to engage military families. And then our final one here, the bonus gold standard one of considering collaboration. So this was really highlighted by just about all of the experts that we talked to, that emphasize how a multidisciplinary approach to treatment and services is a goal or best practice. Multiple providers can work together to address the variety of needs and issues military families face with physical health, mental health, and community engagement. Good collaboration and coordination with other providers and across the spectrum of creative arts therapists and community arts providers will really strengthen your program and improve your outcomes. So how to assess the needs in your community? What are some of the best practices there? So here are a few thoughts. Get to know your community, and really the best way to assess for needs and really make sure that you're identifying a gap and not duplicating an existing service is to talk to providers in your community. Get to know what's already out there. Talk to participants that you may already be serving. So get to know the specific needs of the families that you serve. Maybe it's holding focus groups, or really working on finding multiple ways to invite that feedback. Some people are more inclined to give written feedback, others, that comes more naturally in conversation. And assessing from a strengths-based approach. So again, shifting from this focus on addressing problems to identifying what's working and what strengths are present that your services might build upon. So for example, arts providers might assess for strengths by exploring with military families what energizes them and how programming might offer restorative opportunities through engagement in the arts. And then we wanted to leave on a bit of an aspirational note. Again, thinking about collaboration and coordination among creative arts therapists and community arts providers, and how this enhances the therapeutic potential of the arts in both settings, clinic and community. Collaboration and coordination increases engagement and provides unique opportunities to address the varied health, well-being, and quality of life needs that military connected community members bring to us more holistically when we're working together. And with that, I will pass it over to Bill. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jennifer and Rachel. Having worked with these populations for about a decade now, it feels so right on the money on so many of these different things that you're pulling forward. I want to very quickly respond to a question. I know we're holding most of them, but I do want to respond to a question that was in the Q&A about potential for funding for nonprofits who are working in communities. And yes, that is something that we're going to talk about at the end of the program. So I just want to put a little teaser there. We do have a national community engagement grant that is open right now. Deadline is in December 15th. We're going to talk a little bit more about that at the end of the show. But I did want to just call out some of the things that Jennifer and Rachel just talked about are so well aligned with what we're trying to accomplish with the grant. It is focused on providing advancing health, well-being, and quality of life for veteran military populations, including families and caregivers. And there's 4 specific outcomes that we're flagging that we'll be measuring and following up on. And they're related to creative expression that can provide a deeper understanding of self and others, building a sense of social connection, meaningful relationships. And the third one is a sense of resilience, or the ability to bounce back from unexpected or challenging life events. And then the fourth outcome is related to successful adaptation to civilian life. So many of those types of themes you could hear in the recommendations that were coming out of the Military Family Needs Assessment Report. And again, you can find some top line recommendations on the National Resource Center, and we'll be publishing the full report later this year. Okay, now I want to move to our last panel, so we have some time for some conversation at the end. We'll come back to some of those themes in a minute, but I'd like to invite Niyati Dokai to the stage. And Niyati is the director of the George Mason Military and Arts program at George Mason University. She's worked with us doing some pilot programs so that we can understand what's happening out there, so that as we built the grant program, we were conducting some program evaluation on some test beds of activity for military folks. So Niyati, go ahead and tell us a little bit about your program, please.
Thank you so much, Bill. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen so I can tell you about our program, and I can share a little bit about it as well. Let me share the sound. There we go. So it is my honor to serve as the program director for George Mason University's Veterans in the Arts Initiative, which is based at our Hilton Performing Arts Center in Manassas, Virginia. And the way that our program began was in 2014, we started having conversations with our community members about what they were looking for from our Performing Arts Center. And we noticed a large number of veterans and service members and their families attending events and wanting to get more involved. And so we held a Veterans Day event with a panel about the significance of arts and service. And we followed that up with 2 interactive Veterans Day celebrations where we had venue-wide events where we got to see our community interact in so many different ways. We created music together, we created visual art, we wrote poetry, we danced. And from that, we decided to create year-round programming so that we could continue our arts practice throughout the year. Our first workshop series that we began with was our Veterans Guitar Workshop series in early 2017. We started it with just 7 people. And immediately it was intergenerational in participation. We noticed everyone from young military children through Korean War era veterans participating. We noticed individual community members participating, community members participating in duos, as well as families that were broadly defined to include anyone in that veteran or service member support system. We also found that we were accommodating musical instruction that our community members had acquired from the different cities that they had lived in throughout the country and throughout the world during their many years of service. And over time, we have found that most of our workshops have an average of approximately 40 community members in each one. In those workshops, we noticed that about 20% of our participants were these amazing military kids and teenagers who were participating alongside of their parents. And so for them, we created a special songwriting series for military kids in 2018. And it has been one of our favorites to create every year. I'm sharing with you here some lyrics that were written just last month. And I'm hoping that I will be able to share with you a piece of that song that was composed because it truly is beautiful.
Band-aids used to fix everything. Found processed cheese in my microwave blunt. Sound of the bell ringing, swinging with strawberry ice cream. They say innocence is bliss. No one ever mentioned this. They say innocence is bliss. I feel bliss.
As Rebecca and Jessica had mentioned, those strong feelings of having to move often, quick transitions, you really feel and see those in this particular song. So when we asked our military kids to bring with them instruments that meant something to them, they brought with them ukuleles that were personalized. And this is when we encountered Creative Forces and the Community Connections projects and the opportunity to pilot something new. And we thought, why not create a ukulele workshop series for our military families, again, broadly defined. And we found that more so than the guitar, ukuleles were accessible and very popular for our younger and older participants, as you see from the participation photo on the left. This is a series that we quickly pivoted online in March 2020, and we also offered again virtually in February 2021. Through the support of Creative Forces, we have created an implementation guide that highlights the lessons that we learned during virtual programming. And we have that guide available at our website, www.hiltoncenter.org. And that's HYLTONCENTER.org. We've also just offered this series as a hybrid series this past fall. And so we will be adding to that implementation guide to let you all know what we have learned through that particular implementation. During our workshops, we have done longitudinal research that has been IRB approved, and we have shared our findings in peer-reviewed conference presentations, as well as journal articles, including the one that I have cited at the bottom of this slide. I'd like to highlight some of the findings that we have had. Some of the themes from our ethnographic observations and semi-structured interviews have been self-reported improvement in health and well-being, especially reduced social isolation, better family relationships, strong adherence and retention to the use of guitar as an activity for recreation, increased social interaction and or self-care. And from surveys that we've distributed, we've noticed an increased interest in learning new skills, increased social connections, and an increased sense of well-being. One of the things that's so important about our program is the collaborative aspect of it. We'd like to thank everyone who has collaborated with us, from the Creative Forces team, the Virginia Commission for the Arts, to all of our colleagues at George Mason. I am just one person representing many, as you see here on the screen today, from our Dean, Rick Davis, to our amazing instructors, to our programming assistant, to our marketing, development, operations, and production staff, who really embrace this program and put themselves behind it week after week to make sure that we are creating the best possible workshops and special events for our military connected community. Thank you so much for the opportunity to share this on their behalf.
Thank you, Neethi. I really appreciate you sharing some of what you've been learning at George Mason, and I know you've had a very strong and long commitment to serving military family populations. I want to repeat again, as we bring all of our panelists back, I'm looking at the Q&As, and there is some interest in how some of these programs can be taking place in neighborhoods where some of the audience members live. And again, we're going to be showing some information and providing some links. In fact, I might ask my colleague to go ahead and drop the link to the national grant, the Creative Forces Community Engagement Grant Program. There's a link to our partner who's helping provide administrative support for that, Mid-America Arts Alliance, that is open. That it's a call for grant projects, and the deadline is on December 15th. And we certainly invite anyone to apply for the grant. One thing that's unique about this grant is that we require partnerships, and this really echoes back something that Jennifer and Rachel had mentioned, that idea of collaboration, and we're hoping and encouraging, and we'll be providing any assistance we can to build these kind of collaborations where military and service and veteran service organizations or military family support organizations who have constituents and stakeholders that they're hoping to support as best they can, so that we can try to build those alliances at the local level, so that the kind of outreach partnerships can be established. So I'm inviting the rest of the folks onto the stage. Great. Hello, everyone. So I want to I took a few notes of things that I thought we would circle back on, and again, dropping in Q&A. And again, anybody in the audience who has a question and hasn't asked it yet, I'm just going to read off one of them here. Can Creative Forces grant be used for ongoing art programs for veterans? Yes. Again, the link that we'll drop into the chat for the guidelines for the grant opportunity will provide you a lot more information than I can here, but there's a lot of different types of projects that we are flagging for support, and they can range from different types of discipline, music, dance. A lot of the programs that we've seen that are really effective have to do with participants actually actively engaging in art making themselves. And we do have observed and have found that sustained programming tends to have a deeper impact than a one-off or a one performance type thing. But I want to come back. One of the unique things about Creative Forces is we have these partners like Jessica and Rebecca who are working in clinical environments, bringing arts interventions, whether it's music-based, arts-based, visual arts-based, or dance movement therapy-based, in a clinical effort. And it's treatment, and it has its own set of strengths. It also has a few challenges. And then we have people like Niyati, who I think is sort of an example of the type of community partner that we'll be trying to bring on with this grant program. There'll be about 35 to 50 grant projects we approximate. So these will be going on all over the country. But some of the themes that you hear and feel are similar. And I want to focus on one and just get some feedback from all of you from your different perspectives, how you see social connection. That's something that comes up over and over again. Sort of the idea of this whole thing was to try to identify what are the unique needs of these populations. Social connection came up. You heard Jennifer and Rachel talk about it. It's also, I think, intuitive, but worth bringing forward that there is sort of a natural way for us to think about how the arts can play a role in building social connection. But I'd like to kind of turn that question over to Jessica and Rebecca, Jennifer, Rachel, and Niyati. How do you see whether it's from a clinical base, from a community-based activity, or from this kind of a scan, what role do you feel the arts can play in building social connection? How does that actually work in the activity? And why is the arts a lever to build social connection? Maybe I'll kick it over to Jessica or Rebecca first and hear from the clinical side.
I can start, and then Rebecca, if you want to jump in. From my position within the clinical setting, it starts with the social connection within the family unit. And then I help them transition into the community, because eventually we have to discharge them. their time ends in our clinic. They've met their treatment goals. And so that next step is giving them all these wonderful community resources that we can send them off to. Oftentimes I may even be like a transitional figure or person to kind of go with them, or I'll give them all the information to go and find these resources. Anything else you want to add, Rebecca?
Sure. I'll just say, I think like identity as, the role in your family and how you identify there in that familial structure, as Jesse said, to really, to understand that and to unpack that first in that clinical session. And then as they identify as now artists, musicians, dancers, movers, and then taking that identity and using that as a real protective factor as they transition to the community, it is invaluable. And so Jesse, you talked about that brilliantly. So.
Great. So I think two things that that you guys just sort of brought up that we've heard and felt quite often is sense of self and the ability to explore who am I. That's kind of what arts does at its core, no matter what you're doing, whether it's to try to leverage it for health, well-being, and quality of life or not. And then I think the other thing that I heard that is really sort of relevant to the role that the arts can play has to do with communication. Being able to put into pictures or put into movement or put into poetry, things that are hard to discuss. You have to stop and really think about them, and then being able to share it can have a real value. So let's take it over now to Jennifer and Rachel. So from your standpoint as researchers who are looking and scanning sort of what are the needs of military families, social connection came to the front for you guys as well. Can you tell us just a little bit about why you feel or what you learned about military populations that seem to have that need? Why is social connection a distinct need for a military veteran family?
I can start, Jen. Well, one of the things I think that came up quite a bit in the literature and in talking with subject matter experts was actively serving military families are, by nature of the service member's career, usually living apart from kind of maybe their initial sort of circle, whether that's their family members or the friends that they've established. So we heard when you raised your question, Bill, I immediately thought of a quote from a subject matter expert who was talking to us about programming for military children specifically, and talking about how one of the really incredible parts is watching military kids kind of find other kids who are like them and who are going through similar experiences, and also having a way to, being able to kind of maintain those friendships even beyond the move. So I was trying to quickly kind of look up, I remember there was a really great quote that talked about art can give voice to kids who don't otherwise know how to express, the emotions or thoughts they have about their family's service, give children a chance to express themselves and make quality friendships. So I think specific to military children, that's one way that sort of this like connection can be formed.
And I think I'll take it back to Neity then. So we've heard from the clinical folks in terms of, in a medical setting, and especially for family programming, the role that social connection has at the level. And I think, we heard from Jennifer and Rachel about, what are the unique stressors and that there are unique needs for military and veteran families who've may have been moved around a lot, especially for active duty, may have been single parenting, maybe caregiving, which can make it hard to get out of the house and interact in your local community. How have you seen, from your standpoint as a community arts provider, the impact or the outcomes related to social connection? How have you experienced that in the room with those participants?
I think a lot of the things that we've seen have already been said. One of the things that we saw a couple of years ago that really gave us pause and realized how impactful community work can be was we didn't realize it, but for one family, we had become their pre and post deployment activity, as the father was on multiple deployments to Iraq. And we didn't know it at the time. And as we started to ask for stories, they told us after this series of deployments were over, what role our program had played for them, that they got to participate in this activity as a family together. The parent was able to take that guitar with them on deployment, and it was a point of connection during that deployment. And then during the reintegration process, it was again an important family activity. And that really gave us pause and made us realize that, in a community setting, we develop these long-term relationships with our veterans and our service members and their families, but we see them through multiple stages of their careers. And so it's just a profound way of serving. And one of the things I always remind our staff who work with our songwriting series for military kids, they're almost entirely the kids of families who are on active duty in the region, who are either based at Marine Corps Base Quantico or at the installation at Fort Belvoir. We never have these kids participate with us for more than 2 years, but they all tell each other about this wonderful experience they had, and they all come back. And so the impact that we're able to have through these children referring each other to this opportunity that we're able to provide is something we're so honored to do. So those longitudinal relationships and just being there as an anchor for those community members as they cycle in and out of our region, such a wonderful way in which a community arts provider can provide a hub for their community members.
Terrific. Thank you all for joining us today. It was great to have you bring your perspectives into helping us mine insights on how to effectively support military and veteran families. I want to just mention one thing that I did underline that Jennifer and Rachel had mentioned, this notion of a strength-based approach. We have learned over time that that's a very effective way really to think about coming into this conversation with military and veteran families. The idea of the arts as being a strength-based approach, it's non-stigmatizing. Even if the themes that you're wrestling with and that you're trying to communicate in your art are deep or heavy, your ability to display them is an act of strength. Even the name Creative Forces is meant to kind of follow that same sort of ethic of being strength-based and non-stigmatizing. And with that, I want to just segue into, as a closing, just to remind everybody that we do have a Creative Forces Community Engagement Grant. The deadline, application deadline is now open. You can see at the bottom here, maaa.org/creative forces. That's the website at our partner, Mid-America Arts Alliance. And they are hosting the guidelines, and they are also available, as are we, to provide technical support for folks who are interested in applying for funding. There's going to be $750,000 of funding support. The grants, again, the deadline is December 15th. We will be announcing those grants in the spring, probably April, possibly May. And I think that will be another second opportunity to think about collaboration and partnerships. So once we know where these grants are going to be, there was a question in the chat about that as well. We'll be announcing where they are. If you want to stay informed of all of this, go to our National Resource Center, which is www.creativeforces.nrc.arts.gov. And you can hit a subscribe button, and we'll keep you posted on any alerts or any announcements we have related to the grant program or upcoming webinars, et cetera. But again, there seems to be a number of people on the line today who are coming not so much from the arts sector, but also from the military and veteran service organization sector. And we really, Uncle Sam wants you again to help us make sure that we're connecting on the ground with the people we're trying to serve. And some of you folks have really effective networks to help us do that. So that's it for today. Thank you so much for joining us. Anybody who signed up for this webinar will be given a link when it is edited and hosted. That'll be in about a week or so. And we also have, we'll be sending out links to 2 other webinars that we've presented recently that are really meant to provide useful information and support for anyone who's trying to support military and veteran populations through the arts, but also with the folks who are trying to organize in their minds a potential grant project. So we'll have all of that information. It's this webinar and one on partnerships and outreach, which we talked a little bit about today. And then the first webinar was actually hosted by our partners at Mid-America, and it's really kind of the nuts and bolts of how to apply for this grant. Thank you for being here today, and so long.
For more information, refer to the National Resource Center at creativeforcesnrc.arts.gov.